dream is coming true.
To build an aircraft like this, F-13, is the biggest experience in my life.
It will be one of the greatest moments in my life when I take off with this F-13 as a pilot.
I'm really happy to be part of this F-13 project.
A legend returns. The Junkers F13, the aircraft with the unmistakable corrugated sheet cladding, marked the beginning of modern passenger aviation in 1919. By 1927, it was flying a scheduled Lufthansa service. Flying has been one of mankind's dreams since time immemorial, but it was 20th century man who fulfilled it. The F-13 kept on carrying passengers to and from almost every continent, all the way up to the 1960s. But then it vanished from the skies and fell into obscurity. Now, almost a century after its historic maiden flight, the first ever commercial aircraft is about to return. It will be the world's only true replica that can actually fly. Almost 87 years later, it's incomparable. It's still amazing, just like it was back then. Seeing the plane fly here almost brought tears to my eyes. Incredible. I've dreamed about seeing the F-13 up in the air for a long time, and today is a dream come true. It's great. A fantastic day. This is a huge moment. I can hardly put it into words. We've worked towards this for so long, and now I simply feel proud. It all began in 2014 in the Black Forest, where workers at Kalin Aerotechnologies sought to bring new life to one of the icons of aviation. Aircraft engineer Dominic has an ambition to get the world's first fully metal passenger plane airborne again, 98 years after its maiden flight. The 28-year-old normally repairs vintage aircraft together with his team, but his new challenge is to build a Junkers F13 from scratch. The team is highly motivated, and the first phase of construction is going well. The basic frame, consisting of tail unit and airframe, is assembled in just a few weeks, but it will take another 3 years before the project is complete. You can see here the tail assembly is already almost finished, and the airframe is also being riveted. We'll have spent around 8,000 hours on the aircraft by the end. The problem is the F-13's construction plans are incomplete. An old aircraft was first scanned to supplement the few existing historical documents from which to produce the replica. In a hangar belonging to the Aviation Museum at Le Bourget near Paris, Kalin spent a week working with other experts, measuring every single detail using a laser scanner. He even used a scan arm to survey inside the wings. Technicians then used the data to develop a 3D model as a basis for the reconstruction. This model here is of course a rarity. It's an absolute dream to build something which was originally made in 1918. Back then, everything was still made by hand. Now Airbuses are being pumped out by machines and there is very little manual work left. It's an absolute dream to produce something that people used to know, but then slowly forgot. A time-consuming process. Special auxiliary structures are made for every component. Here we see the center box, which is the aircraft's central wing unit. Some of the tubes are already fixed in place. Some parts are still being made piece by piece. They'll also be finished in a month or two. The wing structure is really the heart of the F-13. A structural engineer can ascertain the correct position using simple means, such as these wooden rings on woolen threads. The corrugated sheet cladding has to be installed in line with the direction of flight so that the aerodynamics are right. Drawings are used that were produced from measurements conducted on F-13s that still exist. You draw up a plan, you create a profile in your mind about how you want to do it, how you want to build this up. And the more information you get, the more you can confirm or not confirm that it's going to work the way you plan it. The best part is seeing when it all comes together. The main construction material is corrugated sheeting made from duraluminum, a signature feature of planes and luggage. Essentially, it's a basic principle of physics that Mr. Junkers decided to exploit back then, and Dieter Morschek's father did the same. They were smart men, smarter than the rest. We met Dieter Morschek at his luggage factory in Cologne. The CEO of Rimowa is the passionate visionary behind the F-13 construction project. He led us into the secret of the material's success. An aluminum copper alloy which was patented by Alfred Wilhelm in 1906. A very, very light material, a very strong material, something completely new back then. Against the historic backdrop of his home city, Morschek recalls the thing which inspired his father to produce luggage from duraluminum corrugated sheeting. The year 1950, when the first aircraft flew non-stop over the Atlantic, was when my father designed and built the first ever suitcase out of aluminum. Aircraft aluminum with grooves. Even back then it was already very, very light and set a trend which still exists today. Lightweight luggage means lightweight travel. A universal lightweight metal aircraft. That too was Hugo Junkers' vision. His F-13 was, in many respects, a revolution. Under the leadership of his young chief engineer Otto Reuter, it took just 6 months to build the world's first commercial aircraft, using an innovative metal alloy called duraluminum. This was the first time passengers could travel comfortably in an enclosed, heated cabin, while the pilot and mechanic sat outside, wrapped up warm. The F-13 set an impressive series of records, including a world altitude record of 6,700 meters in September 1919. By the time it ceased production in 1931, 350 of the aircraft were active all over the world. There is still a corrugated sheet die at the Deutsches Museum in Munich. It helped write the history of the F-13. The aluminum sheets for the new vehicle were also made by hand. Dominic developed a press specially for this purpose. What's special about this mold is that it is a deep drawing system. It can resist pressures of over 600 kilograms per square centimeter. This means it is a system, meaning a synthetic material, which has been reinforced. The cast resin has been modified using metal to increase its pressure resistance. The sheets of metal are now shaped in 3 dimensions at either end, unlike the original Junkers plane. This reduces the risk of cracks forming during assembly. The cladding of the wings is time-consuming and requires the utmost precision. The fuselage takes shape next door. The corrugated sheeting has to be riveted exactly. Also on the team, Dominic's wife, Sandra. A trained pilot, she is busy making sure the rivets are correctly positioned.
The difficulty is simply that there isn't much space between the waves, and we always have problems with riveting hammer if the holes are not right in the middle. It cannot dance into the metal or make the rivets bend over, which makes them too weak.
Rivets are placed every 2.5 centimeters with the utmost precision. It requires a lot of concentration. Her husband Dominic is a perfectionist.
It's his life and passion. He wakes up with it in the morning and goes to bed in the evening with the documents. There's no end to it.
Dominic was building his first aircraft prototypes at the tender age of 11. As an adult, he succeeded in turning his hobby into a profession. Combining passion with expertise, he is exactly the right person for the F-13 project. But why are the silvery rods and sheets now suddenly green? That's a base layer, a primer which seals the aluminum layer and protects it against corrosion. It's an epoxy system with zinc chromate. All the parts remain green on the inside, but the outer surface of the F-13 will later be repainted in the characteristic silver. Involved in the reconstruction of the F-13 is Bernd Huckenbeck, project manager and chairman of the Association of Friends of Historic Aircraft. Today, he has brought another folder full of historical documents from all over the world. Here we now have the modifications. These are the documents I got from Sweden. You can see here exactly what the F-13, W-33, and W-34 were. That's especially important to us because it's about the firewall, the engine mounting. We can use these drawings to put together which components have to be replicated, which of them can be made to the original specifications using the drawings, and which have to be calculated. There are only a very few original physical items available to the team to base the replica on. Here we have an original bracket from the 1930s taken from a Junkers aircraft. We're using the original to adapt it. Afterwards, the part will be dismantled and made fully functional again. Bernd Huckenbeck's researchers achieved a breakthrough 2 years ago. At the Deutsches Museum in Munich stands a perfectly preserved example of the F-13, which became the model on which the replica was based. Project manager Huckenbeck has access to one of the world's biggest Junkers archives and is able to inspect many of the documents produced by the brilliant aircraft engineer. I had the idea for this F-13 project back in 2009. I started my research in 2010, and then it turned into something of an addiction. Early in my researches, I came across Dieter Morschek, who took a sightseeing flight with us in the U-52. He thought it was a really great idea to get this forgotten aircraft back into the air, and he spontaneously said he would be part of it. The CEO of Rimowa is financing the entire project. Not only is his company's history closely connected to Junkers aircraft, he is also a passionate pilot himself.
Die Technik ist einfach das, was mich persönlich sehr begeistert.
It's the technology which I'm most enthusiastic about. I've been interested in airplanes since I was little, and we now have, or I personally have, the opportunity to repeat this 1919 project. I think it's that which is so exciting, actually. The fact that we can now replicate something so incredibly important in aviation, the world's first fully metal commercial airplane. That it's being brought back to life after so many years, and the plane is going to fly again.
Das erste Ganzmetallverkehrsflugzeug der Welt, dass man das nach so vielen Jahren jetzt wiederbelebt und dieses Flugzeug in die Luft bringt.
There are only 5 examples of the legendary aircraft left in the world today, all of them museum pieces that can no longer fly. Bernd Huckenbeck has been rummaging through the archives for years, on the lookout for original drawings and photographs.
Sehr interessant für mich, weil es zeigt, dass es die F-13 mit einem Sternmotor gab.
It's very interesting for me because it shows that the F-13 was built with a radial engine as well, and that's how we're building it. This is, of course, a fantastic story, the fact that somebody's doing up a Junkers again. Junkers is a name that lives on in Germany, and for us, it's good that we have so many archive sources we can make available and that are helpful for the reconstruction. They look for the needle in the haystack, which will help them make the F-13 as perfect as it can possibly be. The head of the archives even gets involved himself.
Das ist ja super. Das sind die Heiligtümer.
These are the blueprints. Those are the sacred sites. Here are the main fuel tanks, which are in the wings. It's incredible to me that they did all this without computers back then. They could still draw.
Ja, das ist im Grunde eines der wichtigsten Dokumente, die
Basically, this is one of the most important documents we have. It tells us how the plane was built, and this drawing means we can also rebuild it.
Und aufgrund dieser Zeichnung können wir es auch wieder aufbauen.
Documents like that are important because for the new F-13 to be allowed to fly, it needs a current flying permit, despite proving itself adequately right back in the 1920s. The world's first ever passenger aircraft took off on June 25, 1919. Its maiden flight lasted for a full 6 minutes, and it laid the foundations for modern aviation. Aeroplane lover Dieter Morschek appointed the foremost people to bring life back to this piece of history.
Und es macht wirklich sehr, sehr viel Spaß, auch zu
I love seeing how much enthusiasm and passion is going into the construction of this aircraft.
dieses Flugzeug zusammengebaut.
We don't want to put this plane in a museum. We want to fly it. We've got a fantastic team. They're experts, and I couldn't imagine anybody better.
Und ich könnte mir auch keine besseren vorstellen.
The structural engineers in Oberndorf are far from achieving any kind of routine. Like the original, the F-13 replica is being made by hand. Extraordinary precision is needed to fulfill today's approval criteria. Data is constantly being compared. Everything is being remeasured and checked using a computer model. The original drawings which we have would be unreasonable for any engineer to follow. In the end of the day, we had to extract from the plans the things you can build. We had to evolve it. How to build it? We had to adapt the designs ourselves to what is possible to manufacture. And afterwards, the way it is built is recorded. And using the model, we can prove it. That gives us complete proof that the plane will stay together the way it is built. Draftsman Roman Braschla needs almost as long to measure and draw the construction plans as Dominic Kalin needs for the construction. The work involved is phenomenal. I get goosebumps just thinking of it. It's a gigantic project. It isn't just an aeroplane. From the engine to the very last groove, it's an enormous challenge. I was relieved afterwards. Of course, you can't take it for granted that everything will work.
Damit wir auch das versichern können, dass das Flugzeug fliegt und hält.
His data is sent to Ennetbergen in Switzerland to a company called Airframe, whose engineers use 3D simulations to calculate the plans for the new Junkers F13. Almost all of the staff there are busy with the project. We at Airframe are responsible for developing all the new components in the F-13 project. That means we build everything that's not based on the old drawings, and we verify that there aren't any strength issues. And every little part, including all the screws that connect it together, has to be documented in an aircraft. Safety regulations are stringent today, and creating modern components using old plans takes time. The availability of materials, new manufacturing processes that we have to use, and old processes which we have to replace with new ones because it was simply too complex, the way it was built, and because today you can make things that couldn't be made that way before. But there's still a lot to do, and new issues keep on coming up as we go along. The whole thing is very interesting. All of the staff are in contact with aeroplane builder Kalin, a correspondence which has proven important. I'm busy here with the engine cradle, which we cobbled together from original documents, adapting it a bit, amending the dimensions and then also calculating them. The original aircraft did, of course, have a different take on loads and stresses. Nowadays, you have to meet other requirements. Once a new part design has been fully calculated, a copy goes to the supplier. One such supplier is Reutemann Technics in Switzerland, metal engineering specialists who have often made spare parts for the Hugo Junkers U-52. The historic F-13 aircraft project became a matter for the boss. Of course, I'm always proud to be able to make something like this for a vintage project.
Für so Oldtimer-Geschichten.
The specially made engine cradle takes longer to manufacture than it would using regular welding methods. Every seam has to fit fully.
Ich rechne etwa mit dem ganzen.
For the whole thing, for cutting the tubes to length, making the weld seams, all in all, I reckon it'll take around 55 to 60 hours.
55, 60 Stunden plus minus so, in etwa, oder? Ja.
Because it takes time to turn a drawing into a finished mount, the engine is suspended at first from a provisional one. And that happens at MSW Aviation in Wohlen in Aargau. This Swiss company is working on the equipment which will supply the engine. Meanwhile, the structural engineering goes on in the Black Forest. The idea is to integrate the drive systems and their components into the model in advance, which saves lots of time later on when the airframe itself is assembled. This is a prototype. There's only one of them. What that means is everything has to be integrated anew, and we can't say we're going to do it like this airplane or that airplane. Everything has to be reinvented. Everything takes an awful lot of time, and to save a bit of time during production, we're trying now to manufacture everything we possibly can beforehand.
Die ein Stück weit zu verkürzen in der Produktion, versuchen wir das jetzt schon so weit wie möglich vorzufertigen.
Development engineer Matthias Heisch is assisting in the assembly work to ensure all the regulations are fully complied with.
Good morning.
Good morning. Servus, Florian. Hello, Jakob. Great. Have you attached the engine mount? Did it go well? Did it fit?
Ging das gut?
Ja. Ging so.
Yes, it was okay. In the end, it worked out.
Ja, wir sollten noch mal über die.
We should speak again about the various add-ons and the places where things pass through the firewall. We've just been busy with that. Temperature sensor, oil temperature. Is it actually allowed to go along here at the top? We have to route the fuel line either over there or along the strut here at the top. Can they be together? Two things. We have to be careful to keep the fuel line and electric separate, so it's good if you put it over there. Then over it goes. Okay? And the second thing, if we lay this here on this engine frame, it does make sense to route this along here at the top, but it mustn't rub. Okay, it's only provisionally laid. We don't know where to go through, and we thought we'd talk to you about it first. And maybe you should have another go at the oil tank, maybe hang it a bit higher. Let's see how we get on with dividing things up. We just have to make sure we can still get it to fill it.
Also, von dem historischen Flugzeug sind viele Komponenten nicht mehr vorhanden.
A lot of components of the historical aircraft no longer exist. That includes the engine. We decided on a completely new radial engine made by Pratt & Whitney. And it has completely different properties when it comes to speed, when it comes to power and how things have changed over 80, almost 100 years. And to license this thing for passenger flight, we have to comply with regulations, like a car, like any piece of equipment.
Für auch den Personenflugverkehr freizugeben, müssen wir Regularien. Wie jedes Auto, jedes andere Gerät muss erfüllt werden.
The aeroplane will only get a permit if everything is built according to the regulations. There is a lot to explain in a historical model. I have almost 25 years of experience with the authorities, and I know what they are strict about and where you can negotiate exceptions.
Wo man über Ausnahmen verhandeln kann.
It's always about experimenting, like with this mock-up, a wooden reproduction of the cockpit. Now we're going to try to arrange everything so that it's as true to the original as possible, but so that it still meets the needs of the pilot, the co-pilot in terms of ergonomics. We will try to arrange all of the instruments and all of the controls in the end so that they work during flight and can be operated safely.
Im Flug funktioniert, sicher bedienbar ist.
But the aircraft is still far from flying. Nevertheless, Kurt Waldmeier, head of Switzerland's U-Air and general contractor on the F-13 project, allows Huckenbeck to show him the progress of construction. The experienced U-52 pilot wants to know one thing.
Für mich geht es ja darum, dass das Flugzeug mal
For me, what's important is that the airplane is built safely. That's what I look for. Of course, it's crucial to me that the airplane's engine, now that we have decided to fit an engine, is a bit more powerful so that you have a certain amount of reserve as a pilot. I think it's going to be a unique feeling when you first take off in this plane. So now the cockpit's pretty much ready for the first frame surrounds for getting in. The seats still have to go in, but here you already have the basis for the instrument panel. The feet go through here, and what Dominic has already done here is in preparation for the firewall, which wasn't there in the original F13. Now we can already see how much distance there is from the airframe. And then, of course, the engine block goes here afterwards. Well, for me, it's actually quite important the angle you look out at, the angle of vision, so that you have a good view of the runway when you approach to land. For me, it's also important if you look in here, how far it is to the engine spacing, from a fire protection point of view, between the engine and the dashboard. Practical experiences like those are also important to structural engineer Kalen, since there are no remaining first-hand reports about what it was like. Yes, I can say that. I trust him fully. I'm absolutely convinced when it comes to the work that it's being done perfectly. Yep, it's nice for me working with such an authority. It isn't just the experience. Kurt is an eminent authority in the aviation business. He's done a lot of aviation in Switzerland. Kurt Waldmeier runs U-Air at the Air Force Center in Dübendorf near Zurich. He rescued and restored 3 decommissioned U-52s using donations over 30 years ago. Now, as many as 14,000 passengers enjoy vintage flights in them each year. He also undertook a spectacular Atlantic crossing in the old Anti-U, together with Rimowa's CEO. I've always loved exceptional things where people say that something can't be done. The F-13 is precisely the type of project that fascinates me. Not just the project with the airplane, but the people. Achieving an almost impossible aim where everyone pulls together. That's the greatest satisfaction for me in all of this. Waldmeier's big passion is flying vintage aeroplanes. It's a kind of flying you can still feel. You need to really feel the airplane. You can't set up the computer, so it does it all for you. You have to feel connected to the airplane and fly it with sensitivity. That's what's challenging about going up in the air with this F-13. Feeling it, mastering it, telling it who's boss. Project manager Bernd Huckenbeck is back on the hunt at Deutsches Museum in Munich, since there are still details of the aircraft that remain unknown. In fact, apart from a few bits, it's all original. In other words, the whole fuselage is original. They found it in Afghanistan and brought it over here in the 1980s. Parts like the wings were added on, but for us, the key thing is to see how the airframe is structured and how the sheet metal was used back then, how it was shaped, the rounded parts, what they did there. How are the sheets of metal riveted together on the bottom of the fuselage? We need all this information since we can't get it from drawings, and that is why I'm here to photograph it. Perhaps the museum's aviation curator can help him. Hello, Herr Holzer. Thank you for coming. Hi there. I think you've seen one of these before. Yes, that's right. I wanted to take a closer look at the plane because, as you know, we're building our own. I've looked at some of the documents in the archive, and we have to have a bit of a look here as well. It isn't all original. Some of it got rebuilt.
Da haben Sie vollkommen recht.
You're probably right there. Half of what is here is original, which means the fuselage and the engine. Also the undercarriage, the propeller, but the wings were added on. And of course, we had the seats and benches pretty much remade because the leather and fabrics were completely rotten. But it does show very clearly what the first ever passenger cabin looked like in an airplane like the F-13 here.
Passagierraum eines Flugzeuges, wie eben bei der F-13 ausgesehen hat.
The open cockpit in the F-13 is always a source of astonishment and admiration.
Das weist auf diesen Berufsethos dieser Piloten hin.
It shows you the professional ethos of these pilots. Back then, they wanted to fly in a real way, which means with an open cockpit, because at the time, they were of the view that you had to feel the weather conditions yourself. In other words, if you couldn't sense the right wind or the rain, then you couldn't fly at all. And then, as protection against the weather, the pilots wrapped themselves up with thick leather flying suits and thick pilot hoods so that they could be out there.
Der Witterung zu trotzen. Also es ist natürlich ein tolles Projekt.
It's really a great project. We can only welcome and support what you're doing. It'll be the first airworthy F-13 in the world.
Ein Exemplar weltweit, das dann quasi wieder Leuten vorgeflogen werden kann.
The expert loves the idea of a new edition of the F-13. A cockpit of the original plane is exhibited in a display cabinet. It is very sparsely equipped, and the pilot and mechanic had very few instruments. They had to fly by sight. It's quite helpful for us to see the original. We don't really need these instruments, though, because they can't be used anymore. They wouldn't be approved for flight. We did consider placing a panel on top so that it looks the same, but that would take up too much space. In short, we have to fit modern instruments, otherwise we can't fly. The design of the cockpit remains a source of discussion. The building of the aircraft in the Black Forest has progressed well. The corrugated sheet cladding is complete.
Nach fast einem Jahr Bauzeit.
After almost a year of working, we put everything together, and it all fitted. 5 of us carried the fuselage onto the center box and placed it down in one go. It was a tremendous feeling. One of the most exciting and critical moments of the entire construction is imminent: putting together the fuselage, wings, and tail assembly.
Jetzt sitzen alle besser aus. Jetzt wieder der Oberhinter, ja genau der.
My heart was pounding beforehand, and afterwards I was relieved. We couldn't really know whether it was going to fit together just like that. Up until now, the work has been on separate sub-assemblies. Only once these have been assembled can the complete aeroplane be distinguished. A few days later, Rimowa's CEO is back on site, and is immediately impressed when he sees the fully assembled plane. In some places, it's just 0.3 millimeters, as thick as cardboard, but it's strong enough. That was Hugo Junkers' philosophy back then. I think it's really brilliant. In actual fact, it's relatively simple, but simple things are often brilliant.
Aber das Einfache ist oft auch das Geniale.
He inspects every detail together with Dominic.
Es wird dann nachher fertig, schön verputzt.
It's really clean and precise, better than the original. That was the aim.
Das war das Ziel.
The boss is satisfied, Dominic Kalin relieved.
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Aber man muss auch sagen, hat uns.
Yes, definitely. I have to say that he helped us from the outset, and he always was full of praise, which does you good, even if sometimes you have to work longer into the evening for it. It's great that he helped us with it, and for us it was a dream come true.
Auch für uns ein Traum.
You can get to love it so much. It's fun, isn't it? Very much, absolutely.
Absolut.
Today is an important day. The fuselage and wings are about to be wetted. Waldmeier, the head of U-Air, and the development engineer Heisch are on hand for the occasion. I think it's brilliant. When I look at it, it seems to me like a baby U-52, something I've flown for 5,000 hours. It really is unique. Yes, we engineers can see now how the wings fit. The airplane is now in one piece and we can keep going. That's actually the big new thing a wetting brings. It fits together and we can keep going.
Passt zusammen, wir können weitermachen.
Dieter Morschek insists on connecting the parts together himself. A symbolic act, but an important one. Fits perfectly. After that, the work continues straight away, meeting with the interior fitter. This is the synthetic leather version. It's just for the samples. In the end, we'll make it all from leather. When it comes to a combination of colors like this, the color range tends towards the yellow. But I myself prefer this cognac. All right, then, if we take a brown like this with beige, then we can't go far wrong. The passenger cabin and cockpit have to look as genuine as possible. Of course, part of the challenge is to do the research and say how things were at the time, what the options were. That's what's so exciting about it. In a project like this, how often do you get to do something like this? You only do it once in your life, and then that's it. You can say this is just a little part of it, doing the fittings, part of building this beautiful airplane. But every detail has to be right. The pilot sits outside, and behind him you have what was the first heated cabin for passengers. And I mean, you just have to include things like that. I believe it's important. The choice has been made. One final check at the plane with the samples. It goes really nicely with the grooves. Great, I'm glad. Perfect. Thank you very much. 2 months later, there is a spirit of optimism in the Black Forest. The transport container is already standing outside the manufacturing hall. An overhauled 450 horsepower radial engine has already arrived at Kalin Technologies. They now face a Sisyphean task. Dominic Kalin and his team have to replace 35,000 small securing bolts with rivets. It takes time and saps energy. Here we're at the wing where Dominic is doing the final work. That means he's connecting the outer skin, the sheets of metal, to the tube system, to the system of struts by riveting. You need 2 people to do that. Dominic, who's positioning the rivets, and Roman, who holds an iron against it from below so that the rivets have something to flatten against on the other side. The project manager has issued clear instructions. Everyone knows what to do, and 80% of it is riveting, riveting, riveting. This secures the sheets of metal, the outer skin, and all of them are people who can rivet. We do have a few other colleagues for the undercarriage who have got used to that. That way everyone can finish their job. Never before have so many people worked together at the same time in the production hall. It's always like that when you get close to the end, but it isn't usually quite like this here. We have a small team who work quietly and are very organized. But now everything is overcrowded. The hall is too small. So it doesn't matter. Now we have to finish. Finish, but preferably without making mistakes. Roman uses a special camera to see whether all the rivets are fully secure. But what if they aren't? Then you count which one it is and said drill it out and put a fresh one in. And then you check it again. It is time-consuming, especially since project manager Bert now has another problem. An important part is missing. The engineers calculated it all very carefully and made sure we'll be able to fit standard parts. But most of those standard parts are only available in the USA. And, as usual, when you're hard-pressed, some piece or other doesn't turn up. But by next week, we'll have everything again. A bit of optimism is certainly needed. Although the end of the day has long passed, nobody here is about to stop. With so much enthusiasm for this legendary plane, the team happily puts in a few night shifts because there is more at stake here. It's a unique project we're working on. It's actually a blessing to be able to do something like this nowadays. Honestly, everyone's in the mood to see it through to the very end. Swiss folk music brings the night to life and motivates the crew. Early the next morning, the technicians check the entire engine unit. Connecting up all of the important drive components turns out to be a serious undertaking. Everything needed to supply the engine: fuel, oil, and integrating the electronics, then installing sensors so that the engine can be adapted easily to the airframe. The main challenge was connecting old instruments that have to look like originals and work like originals too, with newer safety electronics and monitoring instruments. The cowling, which they had made themselves, is fitted before painting. Only then is the engine back again. The tanks have also been specially made and built into the wings. They hold 220 liters on each side, which means a total of at least 4 hours flying, plus reserve. That's much more than anyone will want to fly in an open cockpit, I expect. True colors at last. The F-13 is given its coat of legendary silver paint, and the engine cowling is painted black. Now it is time for the F-13 to move on. Packed up in 3 parts, the plane crosses the border in a specially made container. It is 140 kilometers from Oberndorf in Germany to Dubendorf in Switzerland. The F-13 is taken to Dubendorf Air Force Center near Zurich. Project manager Hückenbeck coordinates unpacking the valuable freight. Okay, we've done it. The F-13 is now in Dubendorf. Yesterday we were packing and stowing everything up to the last minute. Dominic is still in bed because he's worked almost continuously for 3 days. We now have to unpack by ourselves. But can I ask that anybody goes in there by themselves and does their own thing? I'll choose which people do what. You two hold on to the tail, and you please grab hold of these rubber parts, place them down again, and reposition them. Now, lift at the back, and push. A hangar at UAir in Switzerland is the new home for the F-13 replica. This is actually where UAir is based. Later on, when the plane returns from the USA, it will be prepared here for its test flights. Also, the plane will be handed over here for the first time to the people who later on will be doing the maintenance and care. And the mechanics can basically acquaint themselves with the aircraft now. Final touches are now being done to the aeroplane. The F-13 team puts all the parts back together with the help of experienced UAir colleagues. The development engineer is also there. So, for instance, it would be bad if the plane fell off its wheels now and was structurally damaged by getting bent in the fall. That's one thing that could happen. Or it could tip onto the side. It's only a tripod, and one part is too heavy, and it tips over sideways. That would be terrible. But apart from that, there isn't anything much that can go wrong now. The designer chats with the upholsterer about choosing materials for the inside of the cabin and cockpit. Sample in the plane is the one with the pale curve. I ordered the color specially so that it matches up. Something neither of them had thought of. Small components like handles cannot be simply screwed on. Can you fit them? You screw them in, don't you? Yeah. I thought we'd use a nice slotted screw. You can't. There's nowhere to put it. There's nothing for it to grip on. The aircraft builder finds a solution, and upholsterer Heinz Noss can begin to put the bordering on the open cockpit. The curves in the metal makes cutting it to shape tricky. So I fit these grooves in here so that it fits exactly and the gap isn't too big. There will be a leather covering over it. It cuts a bit unevenly at the moment, but you won't see that afterwards when it's covered with leather. I love this plane, I do. I'd love to fly in it one day. Maybe I will. But flying in it will not happen yet. because so far only the samples are finished. Of course, we have a rough concept, and it's running now too. But as I said, we're bound to encounter a few obstacles when it comes to the belts and other things. So you can't really say yet, well, I can say all clear, definitely, but there isn't anything else that will stop us from getting it finished. Then Mr. Morschek can stand in front of it and say, wow. F-13 investor Dieter Morschek wants to come tomorrow and inspect the fully assembled aeroplane. Everyone is working very hard. Dominic Kalin is happy that nothing was damaged during transport. Fitting together the parts of the airplane goes smoothly. Heinz Noss starts his upholstery work from scratch. He wasn't able to take any measurements beforehand because the building of the airplane got delayed. Basically, I'm doing a surround for the pilot, a protective padding. I've made the padding and there will be a cover over it, and it's semicircular. It looks like a pair of glasses from the front. Night shift for the upholsterer. The surround for the open cockpit is more complicated than expected, and the passenger cabin has not yet been fitted out. The wings were fitted in a hurry, and they paid the price the next morning. Dominic Kalin notices too late that he simply forgot a crucial detail. The engine and its suspension, hood, and propeller are not going to be fitted until tomorrow. There is still a lot to do. Day 2 in Dubendorf. Dieter Morschek, Rimowa's CEO, wants to inspect the finished aircraft in just a few hours. It's the home straight for the return of a legend. UAir's mechanics fit the radial engine. The cowling will later cover it. Upholsterer Noss's long night shift is showing. I made use of the time because there was nobody there. I could get into the plane at last and get all my things done. I made the carpets, the seats, the trim. I got it all finished. Well, not quite, because now he has to fit everything into the passenger cabin. Next, I'm making the seat padding and then the backrest padding, and at the end I'll fit the roof lining. UAir staff want to place the oil tank behind the engine, but they encounter an unexpected problem. The securing strap does not fit. I've cut off so much and it's still too short. What kind do you need? 20 millimeters longer, then it'll fit. Giving up is not an option. Improvising is. The oil tank is in position. The engine cowling is screwed on. They have made up for the lost time. The engineers who designed the various parts now check the fit. Precision work. Up to now, we'd only seen it all on the computer, but now we can look at it on the finished airplane and see whether we did it right. The 3D simulations and calculations were highly sophisticated. We're now checking whether the current construction stage, as it stands here in the hangar, actually corresponds to our original calculations. Then we can say, okay, the structure of the aircraft is good so far. It's up to the loads we expected. Every detail is documented for the license, no matter how small. Every step of the work, no matter how insignificant looking. It definitely was a challenge, fulfilling the new regulations that we have today and combining them with the old airplane as it was before, which in some ways didn't have to fulfill any regulations at all, and we have to at least roughly meet the safety standards that apply today. Well, I'm impressed. Roman sent me a photo of the assembly hall around 3 weeks ago, where you could see nothing much apart from a few sheets and a bit of green metal standing around, not yet much of the airplane. And now, to see it standing here painted, engine fitted, wings on, tail on, it's pretty impressive. Now you can see it's going to be an airplane. The work is far from over. Dominic attaches the kick strips. Yep, it's always like that. The airplane stands there and everyone thinks it's finished, but it isn't. The devil's in the details, where you have to invest a bit more time so that it all comes out nicely. He is not referring to the propeller, which his colleagues are busy fitting. We forgot that once we got the wings on, we wouldn't be able to fit these strips on anymore. The wings were attached too quickly. There is no time to take the wings back off the fuselage. What now? The solution to the problem. Dionis, 8 years old. He's helping me tighten the screws where I can't get in. It's very tight inside the wing and he's helping me. He's off school today. The grandson of UR's Hans Hollenstein climbs through a hatch beneath the fuselage and right inside the wing. Last-minute rescue, since the F-13's presentation is drawing near. Dionis presses a block against the metal sheet from the inside, while Dominic drills the screws through the strips from outside. It's done. Now all they need is the perfect place for the F-13 nameplate. This nameplate has been modeled on an original Junkers 1. Back then they used to name their aircraft. Junkers started off by naming his first 2 planes after his daughters, and afterwards they received bird names. So we thought we'd call the plane Anneliese II. Finished at last. After 2 days of constant stress and chaos, clearing up and cleaning is a breeze. The Junkers F13 replica is now ready for inspection. Everyone is waiting apprehensively for the arrival of their investor, who is arriving in another vintage aeroplane. It's a very special moment. Dieter Morschek sees his Anneliese II in its full splendor for the first time. He is blown away. I'm overwhelmed. In all honesty, I have to say this is one of the best days of my life. I never ever expected this would come true. Dominic, hi. You're such a great guy. It looks great.
Super.
Looks like a plane, doesn't it? I'm overwhelmed. Of course, Dieter Morschek affixes the nameplate himself. Every detail is right. The F-13 visionary is delighted. Congratulations, it's absolutely brilliant. It's turned out perfectly. Anyone would think 100 had been made before. It's an incredible feat of engineering, including the way it was put together, and it's built so cleanly. It looks absolutely perfect. This is a plane which nobody can remember, from the pioneering year of 1919. They developed this F-13 very quickly, and in its first year it had already achieved a world altitude record of 6,500 meters. It's actually pretty amazing how far they got back then, and how far Hugo Junkers was. He led the world. The famous Anti-U and its F-13 forerunner, two legends alongside each other once again. The investor and project manager look happy. I'm very proud that it worked out and that we also managed to find other people to get involved and help. I couldn't have taken the idea any further on my own. It's great to have found a few other crazy people, crazy in a good way, who played their part and ultimately had the drive to see it through right to the end. When you look at how precisely and quickly all of this has happened, including the construction, it's really remarkable. The first phase is complete. Now it's time to push, since before the F-13 can actually take off, it has to go through a long series of tests. It will be another 15 months before its spectacular maiden flight. Photographer Cynthia Borroso captures the new aircraft perfectly.
It's so much fun. The team is great. We are all really motivated. This is a very special project for me. Absolutely lovely. Just like that, yes. I made the whole concept myself. You need to be very creative, and I love that. I can really give free rein to my ideas, and this is the best thing of all. It's a very special thing for me.
Und kann mit seiner Kreativität arbeiten. Das ist für mich ganz Besonderes.
The photographer was inspired by archive documents.
It
started when we were looking for all the outfits. We are going around theater equipment stores. We researched a lot of things, many of them actually from the 1920s.
A photographic voyage through time, captured for a book designed to bring the story of the F-13 back to life. We meet Leonard Anderson at the Hugo Junkers hangar in Mönchengladbach, the hometown of the aviation pioneer. Anderson is a scientist and author and has been studying the world of Junkers aeroplanes for more than 30 years. The F-13 project was of immediate interest.
Well, I thought, is it real? Will it really happen? I think it's a fantastic idea to recreate this aircraft and to make it flying.
Anderson provided the historical background for the new book about the F-13 replica.
It's a really big subject, but we have tried to make it somewhat popular. You can almost get the feeling of how it was in those days when you open the book and look at these photos.
Contemporary witness Hans-Walter Bender looks at the pictures and begins to remember again. He can hardly wait for the legendary plane to return. She will fly, oh yes, she will fly. Soon, I hope. An app is used to link short explanatory videos to the book. Yes, that's exactly how it was, just like that. Together with his son, the 93-year-old browses through the family album. He flew in an F-13 when he was 6 years old. It was a real experience. Here we are climbing on board, up a few steps, and then along the wing. His mother booked a pleasure flight over Görlitz as a present. It was the 8th of September 1929 when we drove out to the airfield. I was 6.5 years old. I just learned to write, so I put my name in the flight book in front of the air safety hut. He even has the original ticket to this day.
Flugblatt war überhaupt nichts los. 4 Passagiere, die da fliegen wollten, einen Rundflug machen wollten. Und dann sind wir
There was nothing at all happening on the airfield. There were only 4 passengers who wanted to fly. A pleasure flight. We just walked up to the aircraft, which was standing right in front of the air safety hut, and climbed up a small ladder onto the wing. After that, we got into the cramped cabin with the pilot at the front. Once he had closed the door, he sat down in the pilot's seat and told the grease monkey, we'd say flight mechanic today, to start up the propeller. Then the engine got going, or maybe not on the first few attempts. But once it started roaring, we began to move. It pulled out away from the hut and onto the grass runway, which was pretty bumpy back then. But still, you could feel the plane getting faster when it accelerated until it slowly took off and the ground below your feet began to disappear. A life-changing experience.
Und mit mal der Boden unter den Füßen verschwunden war. Ein prägendes Erlebnis.
The pleasure flight over his hometown lasted only half an hour and cost 5 Reichsmarks, a lot of money at the time. 5 marks was quite a lot for my mother to take from her housekeeping money. A bread roll cost 2.5 pfennigs back then. For a young lad, it was a real sensation. It was the most cutting-edge thing there was. The aircraft was the start of a new era, the modern age. People could fly. It was magnificent. There could be nothing more inspiring. As an old man, being able to get on board the F-13 again and fly in it now, that we're all used to modern aircraft. It was the first commercial aircraft, you could say, the world's first passenger plane. That would be so fascinating. It would top anything else. But before that happens, the F-13 has to travel to the EAA Air Venture Aviation Trade Show in Oshkosh, USA. Each year, more than 800,000 aircraft enthusiasts visit the world's biggest exhibition of private aircraft, vintage planes, military jets, and aviation one-offs. 800 exhibitors present more than 15,000 airplanes at the vast show. The F-13 arrives undamaged after 2 months at sea. The aircraft's builder Dominic gives it the finishing touches in the trade fair hangar. The people here in the Weeks hangar are great. They help us with everything, which is awesome. That's what flying is all about. Wonderful. Cosmetics removed from the bustle of the fair. Everything is strictly secret. This airplane will only be unveiled at its own special gala. Only Matthias Heisch, the development engineer, is allowed to help. A legend is being prepared for the show. So we've got work here which we couldn't finish on the aeroplane in Dubendorf, and we finished it now. That includes the wingtip, which we attached, and includes the wing transitions. And the window panes have been fitted now so that the airplane really is in tip-top condition.
So dass das Flugzeug wirklich in einem ordentlichen Zustand dasteht.
Das ist ein luftfahrtzugelassener Kleber.
That's an aviation-approved adhesive and sealant, and I'm putting it on so that the window panes, which are only held in position by screws, fit snugly and are sealed.
Anliegen und abgedichtet werden. Das sind alles Luftfahrtbegeisterte.
All of them are aviation enthusiasts, and they can see straight away that this is a unique plane. It's a rarity, and I think it's really going to thrill the enthusiasts. It's unique. There aren't any others like this.
Enthusiasten hier das Herz höher schlagen lassen. Das ist ein Einzelstück, es gibt's nicht wieder.
It's easy to find volunteers to help take the F-13 to the venue, veiled against visitors' curious looks under the cover of night. There, the F-13 team attached the wings to the fuselage. Project manager Bernd Huckenbeck has prepared for this American exhibition for months. I think the F-13 will be well received because this is a convention for makers of home-built planes. Some people in America recognize this plane from the history books, and I think it's going to be really interesting. A lot of people have already thanked us for going to the effort of bringing the plane over here. Preparations for the gala begin the next morning. setting up the stage, laying the dinner tables, a final technical check, rehearsals for the stage show. Top model Johannes Hübel is full of praise for the star of the evening.
So this is my first time I see this beauty of a plane. Very nice. I think it's really cool that they do this, and it just shows the love and the passion, for aviation.
The evening's most important prop is veiled in proper style. Then it's time to go. Time to set off on a journey through time that tells of the birth of modern aviation. The CEO of Rimowa has invited around 150 guests from all over the world. The ambiance is very much in the style of the Golden 20s. Supermodels Alessandra Ambrosio and Johannes Hübel contribute star appeal. But the high point of the evening is the unveiling of a legend.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Rimowa F13. Our legend grows new wings.
It is a historic and emotional moment for the visionary.
I will show you here, that's aluminum luggage with the grooves. That's the original piece from 1950. And it's made out of the same material the F13 is made of.
Showtime. The F-13 team introduces themselves.
It's for me a pilot with 5,000 hours on the U-52. The next step to fly the F-13. I think it's the last step in my life I can do in my aviation career.
Now the supermodels take to the stage.
The Junkers F13 is amazing. Like, I was impressed with this aircraft, and it's a piece of art. It's like history, and it's wonderful that Dieter is bringing it back to life.
Chapeau, Dieter, to you and your team. It's an absolute beauty.
The sensation was a success, the evening a hit, and Rimowa's CEO is not the only person to be moved. Today we pay tribute to pioneers who truly deserve our praise. It's the world's first all-metal commercial aircraft. I'm delighted that we've managed to do this in a way that I believe no one else has. It was a big moment. This is something we've been working on for the past 2 years, and now we're finally finished. It's a thing of beauty. There's no going back now. It will take to the skies next year, and that's a great feeling. There isn't much time to celebrate. It's still nighttime, and the F-13 team brings the machine for an unusual meeting at sunrise. The new A350, the world's most advanced passenger plane, meets the Junkers F13, a legend. It is a very special moment for U.S. pilot and circumnavigator Amelia Rose Earhart.
It's an incredible feeling to be standing in front of these two aircraft. It's the epitome of modern elegance in both forms, with the mother of all aircraft here with commercial aviation in the F-13, and then you've got the A350 right behind us. And I think it shows us how far we've come, but also it reminds us that where we've started and where we're headed in the future has no bounds.
Pushed by friendly soldiers and directed by project manager Huckenbeck, the Junkers F-13 rolls over the exhibition grounds when two EAA visitors happen upon the vintage beauty. Despite their 45 years in the aircraft industry, Judy and Mark are astonished.
Oh man, look at this. This is absolutely gorgeous. Prize of the day, Judy.
The two of them are big F-13 fans.
Today was my lucky day of Oshkosh. This is the beginning of the airline aviation industry. It's capital. It's absolutely capital. It's one of the best things that I could imagine for all of Oshkosh. I'm so excited I can't stand it.
Over the coming days, the F-13 will be parked outside the Silva Rimowa Trade Fair hangar, where visitors can learn about the story of the historical connection between the famous suitcase and the forgotten airplane with the grooves. The return of this unique technical and cultural aviation history asset draws visitors as if by magic.
I love it. I love it. It's a real plane, the way it should be.
It's very interesting. The beauty and the science mixed together, you wish it happened today.
It's a piece of history. And if you think about it, how old this airplane is, I mean, it's new, but the technology is old. Then it's amazing that you can fly something like this. Then the new A350 begins its air show and flies a round of honor above its vintage predecessor. It may not have flown, but the F-13's trip to the USA was a total success. September 2015, Dubendorf Air Force Center. After almost 2 months at sea, the F-13 is back in its home hangar. Not all of the crates have been unpacked yet, but for project manager Hückenbeck, the next crucial phase begins now.
Oshkosh war natürlich für uns alle das Highlight und wir haben
Oshkosh was a great highlight, a real success for us. The visitors at Oshkosh were very positive, and our team is ready to keep going and get the plane up in the air here in Dubendorf in the spring.
Wir sind sehr zuversichtlich, dass wir dann im Frühjahr nächsten Jahres die Maschine hier in Dubendorf in die Luft bringen.
First work, then play, then work again. Development engineer Matthias Heisch discusses the forthcoming series of tests with test flight engineer Oliver Bachmann. The challenging thing in this project is that we don't really know anything about how the airplane behaved. There are lots of building specifications from then about how the plane was constructed, but we don't have any reports about how it actually handled, how it was controlled, how difficult it was to fly, and that makes things difficult for us. We're starting off with a prototype, which we're not familiar with. We know how it works from a technical perspective, but it's an old airplane, so it can throw up some surprises. The test list is long, and there are still items to be added. I think it's going to take quite a long time before we know how it behaves on the ground, the way the brakes work, the steering with the back wheel. It'll take time.
Das schon noch, das braucht Zeit. Das braucht Zeit.
Wenn wir die Bodenversuche gemacht haben.
Matthias tells Oliver what is installed beneath the hood. The development of heat might present a problem. We'll have to look at the effect. We don't want the engine compartment to get too hot if you don't have any oil cooling, because we have no oil cooler outlet. We could fit temperature strips, it's no problem. I could actually include it in the schedule we're putting together. If we describe the procedure using keywords, we can actually bring our test equipment in as well.
Jeweils nur stichwortartig beschreiben, können wir natürlich auch unser Testequipment reinnehmen.
The tests are divided into ground runs involving taxiing and engine tests, and an elaborate series of flights. 4 passengers are going to fly in it, which makes it all the more important for the pilot to see when the aircraft is being assembled how the systems are built in, so that he has the necessary understanding of the system in flight, and so that he can operate the system and maneuver correctly. Oliver is also a test pilot for the F-13. Before the tests begin, UAir staff replaced the provisional undercarriage, which was fitted only for transport. But putting together the actual rods and the tires is just one aspect. There's still a lot to do. It's not all done overnight. Rome wasn't even built in 100 years. They're still busy with it. The airplane has to go onto the scales for more calculations. First of all, the airframe, then the wings and the tail assembly. 558 kilograms for the airframe alone. Then the whole thing will be assembled and there will be a total weight. Using these weights, which we have individual weights, Airframe will develop a matrix which will show us where the plane's center of gravity is. The pilots will need that later on for flying so that they know where they can load the plane in such a way that they stay within the center of gravity. And of course, you also need fuel to fly. We've finished the tanks now. They had to be developed from scratch. They were made using a special synthetic material and laminated. And they have various layers in them, including a special plastic lining which is resistant to fuel so that the tank doesn't dissolve. Structural engineer Dominic moves closer with structural draftsman Roman. It's now time to install the equipment. The first thing to do is adjust the control system for the elevator unit. We need to look at it like this. There are lots of modifications built into the airplane, and now we need to find ways to adapt these modifications to the controls. It's quite tricky, but it's worked very well so far. It just needs some time until everything's running smoothly. Once everything is working, Dominic instructs the people at UAir. From now on, they are responsible for servicing the F-13. We'll have to do all the checks after this. How's the control system set up? How can we check things? Where do we have to measure something or do it visually? So that we know from the outset how the whole thing looks. Dominic and Roman regularly refer to the old construction diagrams to see whether the engineers' new designs can be reconciled with them. The instruments in the cockpit are now adapted by Matthias Heisch with the help of the flight engineers and the specifications. The cockpit is going to be new, so there will be a new layout for the cockpit. And as soon as we've talked everything through with the aviation office next Tuesday, we will fix it and assemble it. That is when they will decide which of the vintage instruments may be fitted. It is now May. The last of the major load tests are beginning. Because modern computer-controlled test setups are unsuitable for a vintage airplane, the engineers have to improvise. They use wooden dummies, lead weights, and a cable control system to test the seat belts in the cockpit and passenger cabin. Each seat is loaded with 300 kilograms. Upward and downward forces simulate flight maneuvers and gusts of wind. This might save lives later on. So, can the Junkers F13's old 1919 structures really pass today's modern safety requirements? This means they're now securely buckled up and now it can shake as much as it likes. The pilots and passengers won't fall out. No doubt about it. They passed the test. The test results, including photographs of the measurement methods, are incorporated into the F-13 documentation. The head of Airframe has brought along a pile of documents for project manager Bernd Huckenbeck. They've got the rear undercarriage, That's the first block.
Dann haben wir die ganzen Flügelanschlüsse.
Then we have all the wing connections, which we've modified and reinforced. Then the control system's linkages. And then we have the ailerons. Those are all parts which weren't in the original. We did modifications which were needed. Then they were fitted and redrawn. The project manager has set up a temporary office right next to the F-13 in the hangar. We need to draw up documentation for the airplane, for the various systems that we've installed, the structural parts that Dominic worked on. We need to document every rivet, every screw, every piece of metal. It sounds like a lot of desk work. 4 weeks later, the test engineers arrive once again, this time with a batch of sandbags for further load tests. Because the project manager has to concentrate on the documentation, the U-Air director's son takes over the coordination of work that still has to be done. It's really exciting. I mean, it's always amazing what they managed to do before, and what we do a bit today. We can do lots of estimates, calculations, and simulations, but the plane itself has to prove whether it ultimately works. Over the next 2 days, various load tests will be conducted on the newly installed control system. Aircraft structural engineer Dominic will be on hand. He is satisfied with the way things have gone so far. We're still working on it. It's actually going well. We lost some time in the autumn as the plane wasn't there yet. Then we needed more time until it got started again. But now it's definitely full steam ahead again, and we're looking forward to September, when we'll be able to fly it. To begin with, Patrice uses a special camera to check the interior. I'm checking whether the connection, the rivets for the attachments, the end pieces are all tight. And here we have a problem already. There is one rivet which isn't tight yet. They're supposed to look like the ones over there. The structural engineer has to intervene and rectify it. When they jacked up the tail, the next problem appears. Water flows out. Dominic wastes no time. A hole is drilled. Problem solved. What happened? The problem was the water had got into the rudder at the back during washing, and there was a kind of trough down there where the water wasn't escaping. And the problem is, if it were to remain closed, the water would stay there and there would have been corrosion. Now the actual tests can begin. Patrice documents everything. Elevators, ailerons, and rudders are on. Using maximum loads, they check whether all the rudders will work, even under the extreme conditions of flight. The engineers compare current data with figures from 1919. It all takes a lot of time.
Gut, danke.
We check the maximum deflections this time. That means we move the aileron right up and then right down, and then set it to the middle. And then we measure the deflections and compared them with the original figures to see whether ours would be the same as they were back then, which is important if we're going to fly the airplane properly. Test day 2 in Dubendorf. The engine has been removed so that they can work on the connections at the same time. An old measuring device called a tensometer is used. So now we're testing the tension of the rudder cables to ensure they're tight enough so that when we do the load test, the cable doesn't go too slack when it's not under load. Otherwise, it might catch somewhere. That might block the controls, which we have to prevent. Time to check the cockpit. Do the pedals and controls work in test mode? Definitely. Heavy sandbags are then brought in to simulate the forces acting on the rudders during a flight maneuver. In the cockpit, construction manager and pilot Silvio tries to steer against it. So that's 100%, 90.74 kilos. Silvio needed to try quite hard to keep control of it, to steer it, but nothing got jammed, and it worked really well. The weight is increased. Now we'll simulate what is called a nose-up maneuver. That means the pilot pulls on the yoke to fly the airplane upwards. I hope we don't ever actually have to fly these maneuvers and withstand these loads, but it's very impressive to see how much it can take. The engineers do this to simulate strong gusts of wind. Exertion in the cockpit. Robert and Silvio try together to counter a simulated extreme load on the rudder. And structural engineer Dominic looks on anxiously. Now we'll see whether everything holds together. Actually, I'm sure it's going to work. We build it like the original, or even better, so it definitely should work. But it's exciting. Robert even crawls inside the fuselage. There is nothing more for Dominic to do, but the engineers are still busy with their tests. The responsibility they carry is considerable. You do get a great certain thrill when finally, based on your test results, you can say the control system is okay, and the passengers, or the test pilot to begin with, can board the plane with peace of mind based on what you say. And there's still a bit of intuition involved in it all. It's really exciting to be part of it. Once the results have been evaluated, the long-awaited approval for the taxiing and flight tests can happen. Electrical engineer Stephen Dunke checks the electronics and the wiring of all the systems prior to the first test start. In principle, the electrical system is structured the same way as before, with the battery, the magnetic ignition systems. That's all the same as it was back in the day. But there are some modern monitoring electronics installed too. You can see that here. Those are the two devices. We've installed an instrument which sends us all the data from the engine: cylinder head temperatures, exhaust temperatures, oil pressure, fuel flow. I love the mix. It makes things really interesting to combine old and new. But that presents a technical challenge, since alongside the vintage instruments, modern monitoring electronics have been fitted in the cockpit in order to fulfill today's safety standards.
Manifold pressure is good,
fuel flow is good, oil temperature is good, 28.6 volt is good.
28,6 volt is good. Good,
tip top. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. Intercom works.
Intercom funktioniert, das ist gut.
It's all about testing as much as possible with the engine at a standstill. And then, of course, the second step is where you leave the engine running and check everything again. The engine is started for the first time. The F-13 springs to life. And the first taxiing test? We tested the two magnetos separately. They worked really well. Fuel pressure, oil pressure, temperatures, everything is fine. It all works perfectly.
Alles im grünen Bereich, also funktioniert tadellos, ja.
Test pilot Oliver Bachmann is up next. He checks the instruments. So we're ready again. We start from the bottom. Trim is right back. Back wheel is disengaged. Oil cooler is open. We'll take fuel from the left. Parking brake on, press, pull again, and it stays. They're all pulled at the moment. That one's pushed. The main switch is in. The thing you have to turn on is the flashlight. That's how you know something's running. The next points of the test are undercarriage check, taxiing at various speeds, brake function. Sensational, so much fun. The way the engine responds is very good. It's intuitive. The taxiing takes some getting used to. We need some time, but we'll get there. What this actually means is that the F-13 still has a lot of taxiing tests to do before it can finally take off. It is September when flight test engineer Oliver Bachmann and test pilot Reis Schmidt go through the F-13's flight program at the first briefing. This is so that Switzerland's Federal Aviation Office can give their approval. The airplane will be put through a series of maneuvers, including takeoffs and landings on concrete and grass runways. Test pilot Ray Schmidt is familiar with a lot of different kinds of airplanes, but flying a Junkers F13 is a special treat. I've never done anything like this before, flying an old, newly built airplane. What strikes me first is that they built excellent airplanes even before 1920. It's impressive. It's about flying with feeling, the smell, the taste, the feel of it. Our modern airplanes have so many assistance tools, and they're so big, it's only mechanical at the beginning. Then you get into the aerodynamics through computers and electronic controls. But here, you're connected directly to the plane. A few days later, preparations for the first flying event are underway in Dubendorf. A reception tent for guests has been set up right next to the runway, a club room in 1920 style. Director Uwe Maas explains the proceedings to the entire technical team. So, standby for the event will be from 3 p.m. onwards, and artists will be running around here. We've got a 20s, 30s atmosphere. Our F-13 will be standing out front by then. The stage has been set at the airfield, and all of the cameras are in position. The first rehearsal with the presenter and Rimowa's CEO goes well. This was something I'd been really looking forward to because you can't really plan it. What about the weather? You have to have a plan B and a plan C. You have to decide, off you go, get in the plane and fly. It gives you goosebumps. Tons of technical equipment mount up outside the hangar. Several teams have to be coordinated simultaneously. Well, it's a challenge from a technical, structural, and logistical point of view. As I said, there are 2 locations that have to be managed, and we've got a very high hospitality factor. The other aspect is the content itself, what makes this event really special. The long and fascinating story of aviation is about to be told. The F-13 has to be rolled into the hall for lighting rehearsals. It's a tricky maneuver, right through the middle of the giant projection screen. Actors and dancers are already rehearsing. The CEO of UAir is relaxed, despite all of the activity in his hangar. This is definitely the right place because it's where they keep the 3 original U-52s made by Hugo Junkers in 1939. I think the plane belongs here. It will make this the world's foremost center for original Junker planes here in Dubendorf, Switzerland. The hangar is swiftly transformed into a stylish dinner and gala venue. A team of 100 people are busy with preparations. The technical direction equipment is installed on a gallery, from which the show, with all its videos, its band, and its live performances will be coordinated. It is the afternoon of September 15th. The first guests arrive, in classic cars appropriately. One of them is Hans Walter Bender, who flew in an original Junker F-13 when he was 6 years old. He is photographed standing proudly in front of the replica. At the club location in the style of the Golden 20s, the CEO of Rimowa greets his international guests. They include the grandson of Hugo Junkers. He shows him the airplane first. This is a huge moment. It's hard to put into words. We've worked towards this for so long, and now I simply feel proud that we've made it this far and can fly this thing. I'm absolutely delighted. In my opinion, the F-13 is the most important plane Hugo Junkers ever built. To see it standing here today and afterwards in the sky, it's a dream come true, actually. And I'm grateful to Mr. Moschek and his F-13 team for having the courage to do this. It's a very brave thing to do. They are about to find out whether their courage has paid off. the reconstructed Junkers F13 sets off for its first official flight in front of an audience of 300 people from around the world. It sets off along a grass runway, just like a century ago. Sitting in the open cockpit, test pilot Oliver Bachmann and F-13 visionary Dieter Morschek fly a loop across nearby Greifensee Lake. After 4 years of research and 3 years of construction, the first ever commercial aircraft returns to the sky. An icon of aviation history is back. It is accomplished. The landing is faultless as well. That was great. Brilliant landing. We did well. A dream has come true for the CEO of Rimowa.
It was a fantastic flight, and Ollie, thank you a lot. It was amazing.
The guests are delighted. It is a moving moment, especially for the grandson of Hugo Junkers and former F-13 passenger Hans-Walter Bender. Almost 87 years later, it's incomparable. It's still amazing, just like it was back then. Seeing the plane fly almost brought tears to my eyes. Incredible. I've dreamed about seeing the F-13 up in the air for a long time, and today the dream came true. It's great. A fantastic day. Astronaut Ulf Merbold is also visibly impressed. These are icons of aviation. Aerospace came much later. It's based on what pioneers like Junkers achieved. Of course, I'd love to have a go in it. The gala is held in the evening, and the whole F-13 team is invited. The curtain rises on an impressive show about the history of almost a century of passenger aviation.
At this point in the evening, we have an incredibly special treat.
One of the highlights of the evening, 93-year-old Hans-Walter Bender gives Rimowa's CEO a framed copy of the ticket for his flight in an F-13 in 1929. The best part of the whole day was when I was able to touch the thing and seeing the maiden flight today, to see the plane flying again and to see it resurrected like that. It was such a thrill. You don't get much better than that. At the end, the whole F-13 team is congratulated. This has to be one of the best things that has ever happened to me. I've never done it before. I've never built an airplane from scratch. And to see it flying here before a crowd of people and the whole fanfare that was put on here today, it's terrific. Absolutely amazing. The evening has given everyone wings, and rightly so. The best part of all was when the plane landed safely after its first flight, and I was able to say, mission accomplished.
The mission is completed.
For me, my own personal highlight was when Dieter Morschek got into the plane and flew in it. And the end of the day, it was him who financed the whole thing, and he believed in us. And I think it was a special moment for him, seeing that he had bet on the right horse and being able to fly here today. We worked so long towards this, and then all of a sudden, it's in the sky and it's flying. And it sits so nicely in the air. That's what impressed me the most. The CEO of Rimowa has big plans for his old new Junkers F13, but he's keeping them under his hat. He's only saying this much: the airplane will be back in the air again soon, telling the whole world its story.
And just to see this amazing, like this beauty behind me.
I'm really happy to be part of this F13 project.